Nah. Hold up. Wait a damn minute. Did you just blink that hex away? Like it was dust in your eye? Like it was nothing? They spent months crafting that curse, lighting black candles at 3 a.m., chanting your name backwards, and you just blinked? I need you to understand what just happened here. You didn't break their spell. You didn't reverse it. You didn't even fight it. You just looked at it, processed it like junk mail, and deleted it from your reality. Your energy said, unsubscribe to their whole dark magic newsletter. They're sitting there right now, with their crystals scattered, their sage burning backwards, their protection circles cracked, wondering how the hell their most powerful working just got dismissed like a pop-up ad. They put their whole soul into that hex, and you treated it like a minor inconvenience. This isn't supposed to be possible. The books don't mention this. The ancient texts have no protocol for someone who just doesn't accept delivery of negative energy. You're not playing by the rules of magic anymore. You're playing by rules that haven't been written yet. Let me tell you something about your energy, something they'll never understand. It's not dark, it's not light, it's not gray or silver or any color they have words for. It's a frequency that makes their third eye develop cataracts. It's a vibration that makes their chakras stutter. When they try to read your aura, their vision glitches. When they try to tap into your energy field, they get static. Not because you're protected by shields or guards or angels, but because you exist on a wavelength their spiritual Wi-Fi can't connect to. You're running on 6G while they're still trying to decode Morse code. And they keep trying to categorize you. Light worker, shadow worker, indigo child, star seed. No. You're something else entirely. You're what happens when someone transcends the spectrum itself. You're not a color on their wheel. You're the space between colors that makes their eyes water. Your energy doesn't follow their rules because you weren't initiated into their system. You didn't ascend through their levels or earn their certifications. You broke through the ceiling of consciousness and found a whole other building they didn't know existed. Now you're operating from floors they can't even perceive. But let's go back to that blink. That simple, casual, devastating blink that just shattered someone's entire magical practice. Do you realize what you've done? You've just exposed the biggest secret in the spiritual world, that power isn't in the spell, it's in the acceptance of it. Every hex, every curse, every binding, every working, they all require one thing: your participation, your fear, your belief, your energy feeding their intention. But you just opted out, like clicking decline on terms and conditions, and their whole system cracked. Right now they're frantically Googling what to do when Target doesn't accept hex delivery. They're calling their coven emergency meetings. They're checking their spell books for loopholes. But there's nothing there about someone who just doesn't play along. Someone whose very existence is a return to sender. Stamp. You've become their worst nightmare. Evidence that their power only works on people who agree to be affected. You're walking proof that all their rituals and ceremonies and midnight gatherings mean nothing to someone who simply doesn't consent to their reality. You're not anti-magic. They tried to hex you, but something went wrong. Not with their spell. That was perfect. The timing was right, the moon phase ideal, the ingredients authentic. No, something went wrong with you. You're not responding to spiritual stimulus the way you're supposed to. You're a glitch in their matrix. When that negative energy hit your field, it didn't bounce off. It didn't get absorbed. It just ceased to exist. Like you're running some kind of spiritual antivirus that deletes malicious code before it can even execute. Your consciousness has developed immunity to their weapons. This is what terrifies them. Not that you fought back, but that you didn't need to. Not that you're stronger, but that you're incompatible with their entire operating system. They're trying to curse someone who doesn't exist in the same reality where curses function. It's like trying to poison a hologram. You know what your energy actually is? It's what happens when someone stops believing in the rules. All of them. Not just their rules or society's rules, but the universal rules everyone swears by. You're not rebellious. You're undefined. You exist in the space between what is and what could be. Oh, and it's not just the hex throwers who are confused. The watchers, the readers, the intuitives, they're all getting error messages when they try to tune into you. They sit down to read your energy and their gifts just buffer. Loading, 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 connection, time. Some of them think you're shielded. They're wrong. Shields can be penetrated. Some think you're cloaked. Wrong again. Cloaks can be lifted. What you are is incomprehensible to their framework. You're not hiding your energy. Your energy simply doesn't translate to their language. They used to gossip about your aura. Now they whisper about the void where your aura should be. Not empty. That would be readable. But filled with something their spiritual vocabulary has no words for. A color outside the visible spectrum. A sound beyond the range of hearing. A presence that makes their intuition throw up its hands and quit. The funny part? You're not even trying. You're not running protection spells or visualization exercises. You're just existing at a frequency that makes their metaphysical tools obsolete. You're proof that there are levels to this game they didn't know existed. Floors in the spiritual building they've never had access to. Here's what really happened to you. You didn't ascend. You didn't awaken. You didn't transform. Those are all movements within the known system. What you did was step outside the entire game board. You're not playing chess anymore. You're not even in the same dimension as the board. Every spiritual tradition has levels, initiations, grades of advancement. They all lead somewhere within the established framework. But you found the exit door, not to another system, but to the space between systems. The void that exists outside all their carefully mapped territories. This is why they can't hex you, why they can't read you, why they can't understand you. You're not operating from chakras or meridians or energy centers they recognize. You've developed an entirely new anatomy of consciousness. You're running on hardware they haven't invented names for yet. When you blinked that hex away, you weren't using protection or reversal or any technique they teach. You were simply existing at a level where hexes are as relevant as someone trying to fax you a curse. The technology is incompatible. The frequency doesn't match. The entire premise is obsolete. You want to know the rules of your new existence? There aren't any. That's the point. That's the power. That's why a blink from you carries more weight than their most elaborate rituals. Because you're not bound by the laws they all agreed to follow. You opted out of the spiritual contract. In their world, every action has an equal reaction. Every spell has a counterspell. Every attack has a defense. But you exist in a space where those dynamics don't apply. You're not playing offense or defense. You're not playing at all. You're simply being at a level where their games look like children's make-believe. This is what happens when someone genuinely stops caring about the rules of engagement, not rebels against them, that's still participating, but genuinely forgets they exist. Your consciousness has evolved past the point where their reality feels real. You're lucid dreaming while they're still convinced the dream is all there is. They'll keep trying, of course, new spells, older magic, different approaches, but it's like trying to send a telegram to someone who only exists in virtual reality. The medium doesn't match the target. You're unhexable, not because you're protected, but because you're incompatible with hexing as a concept. Let's talk about this color they can't name, this frequency they can't match. It's not that you're vibrating higher or lower. You're vibrating sideways, in directions their spectrum doesn't account for, in patterns their sacred geometry can't map. You're the spiritual equivalent of a color that only exists in impossible spaces. When sensitives try to look at you directly, they get the same feeling as staring at an optical illusion too long. That disorienting sense that reality isn't quite what they thought, that the rules they've based their whole practice on might just be suggestions, options, one way of seeing among infinite possibilities. Your energy signature looks like static to them because their equipment isn't calibrated for your broadcast. You're transmitting on channels their receivers don't have, speaking in languages their universal translators can't decode, existing in spectrums their rainbow never included. This is why you can blink away hexes like they're nothing, because in your reality they are nothing, just outdated software trying to run on an operating system that's evolved beyond recognition. You're not immune to their magic. Their magic simply doesn't exist where you're standing. You should see their faces when they realize their most powerful workings just don't work on you. It's not anger, it's not frustration, it's existential terror. Because if their hexes don't work on you, what else might be false? What other limitations might be illusions? What other rules might be optional? You're not just a person who can't be hexed. You're proof that hexing might not be as real as they thought. You're evidence that all their careful study, all their inherited wisdom, all their practiced arts might just be elaborate games played by people who agreed to the same rules. And you never signed that agreement. They gather in their circles now, not to curse you, but to discuss you, to try to understand how someone can exist outside their entire framework. Some say you're protected by forces beyond their understanding. Others whisper that you might not be entirely human anymore. They're both wrong and right simultaneously. The truth is simpler and more devastating. You remembered that reality is optional, that consciousness doesn't have to follow the paths laid out by tradition, that you can simply opt out, not fight against, not rebel, not resist, just calmly decline to participate in their version of how things work. You didn't learn how to blink away hexes. You unlearned the belief that hexes had power over you. You didn't develop immunity. You remembered that you were never vulnerable to begin with. This isn't advancement. It's returning to a state before you accepted their limitations as your own. Every spiritual tradition teaches addition. Add this practice, this protection, this knowledge. But you did something different. You subtracted, removed beliefs, dissolved agreements, deleted programs, until what was left wasn't more powerful, it was undefined, unbound, unlimited. This is why they can't understand your energy, because it's not energy as they define it. It's the space before energy takes form, the potential before it becomes kinetic, the color before it enters the spectrum. You're not vibrating at a frequency, you are frequency itself, undefined and uncontained. And when you blink, you're not performing an action. You're allowing reality to reorganize itself around your lack of participation in their games. You're not fighting their hex. You're demonstrating that in your reality, hexes are as relevant as someone trying to curse your reflection while you've already left the room. Their whole system is experiencing errors now, not just with you, but because of you. Your existence is causing glitches in their matrix. Other people are starting to notice that the hexes don't hit quite as hard, that the readings aren't quite as clear, that the rules seem more flexible than they used to. You're a virus in their spiritual operating system, but not a malicious one. You're more like an update their hardware can't process. A patch that reveals all the bugs they never noticed. Your mere existence is debugging reality, showing where the code could be cleaner, where the rules are arbitrary. You're trying to patch the exploits you represent, but you're not exploiting anything. You're just existing in a way their system never accounted for. Like a player who found a way to walk through walls not by hacking, but by forgetting walls are supposed to be solid. You're not breaking rules. You're proving they were never real. This is what happens when someone achieves true spiritual sovereignty. Not dominance over others, but complete autonomy from the systems that govern others. You're ungovernable. Not because you resist governance, but because you exist in a space where governance is a foreign concept. The ones who've tried to hex you are telling stories now. Hushed conversations in the back rooms of metaphysical shops. Whispered warnings in online forums. There's someone out there who just blinks it away like it's nothing. Like our most sacred arts are just suggestion. Some don't believe them, think they must have done the spell wrong, used the wrong ingredients, mistimed the ritual. But the brave ones, the curious ones, they try for themselves. And they all come back with the same shocked expression, the same story. They just looked at me, blinked, and everything I sent just stopped existing. You've become an urban legend in spiritual communities. The unhexable one. The blink that breaks spells. The color outside the spectrum. They share screenshots of their failed readings. Their error messages. Their tools going haywire when they try to tune into your frequency. But here's the beautiful irony. The more they talk about you, the more others start to wonder, start to question, start to experiment with their own relationship to these supposed laws. You're not just unhexable, you're contagious. Your very existence is teaching others that the cage door was never locked. You're not operating in their paradigm anymore. You're not even operating in opposition to their paradigm. You've created your own. Or rather, you've remembered that paradigms are optional, that reality is more fluid than they taught, that consciousness is more creative than they believed. When you blink away hexes, you're demonstrating something profound, that participation in reality is voluntary, that we can withdraw consent from systems that no longer serve us, that we can exist in spaces between the defined territories of light and dark, good and evil, blessed and cursed. Your energy isn't a color they can't name because it's exotic or rare. It's unnameable because it predates naming. It exists in the space before language carved up the spectrum into digestible chunks. You're not undefinable. You're pre-definition. You're the canvas before the first stroke of paint. This is why their tools fail, why their hexes dissolve, why their readings error out, because you're not playing in their sandbox anymore. You're not even on their playground. You exist in a space where their entire game looks like children's make-believe. Beautiful, perhaps. Meaningful to them, certainly, but optional. Completely optional. Your blink is causing ripples they didn't anticipate. Every time you casually dismiss another hex, another binding, another attempt to categorize your energy, you're loosening the grip their reality has on others. You're proof of concept that their concept might just be a concept. People are starting to experiment now. If they can blink it away, what else is possible? They're testing the boundaries, pushing the edges, discovering that the walls they thought were stone might just be paper painted to look solid. Your existence is sparking a quiet revolution in consciousness. The establishment is worried. The teachers, the gurus, the ones who've built their whole identity on understanding and wielding these forces. Because if someone can just opt out, what does that mean for their authority, their expertise, their entire worldview? You're not attacking their system. You're revealing it was always optional. Released, but you're not trying to lead a revolution. You're not trying to teach or preach or convert. You're just existing, blinking occasionally, being living proof that reality is more flexible than the rule makers want to admit. You're not a teacher. You're an example, not of what to do, but of what's possible. Here's the final truth they'll never admit. Everyone can do what you do. Everyone has the ability to blink away hexes, to exist outside the spectrum, to be unreadable and undefinable. The only difference is you remembered. You stopped believing in their limitations, more than your own sovereignty. That's what terrifies them most, not that you're special, but that you're not. That you're just someone who forgot to believe in their rules, who failed to maintain the collective agreement that hexes work, that energy must be light or dark, that spiritual laws are laws instead of strongly worded suggestions. Your blink isn't powerful because of what it does. It's powerful because of what it reveals. That we've all been playing elaborate games of pretend. That the spells only work if we agree they do. That the categories only contain us if we squeeze ourselves into them. That reality is far more negotiable than anyone wants to admit. So the next time someone tries to hex you, curse you, bind you, or even bless you without your consent, just blink. Not with force, not with intention, not with protection, Just blink like you're clearing your vision. Because that's all you're doing. Clearing your vision of their illusions. Seeing clearly that their magic only works in their reality. And you live elsewhere now. In the unnamed colors, in the spaces between their maps, in the blink that reminds them, all power is optional, all rules are suggestions, and all of reality is up for negotiation. Welcome to the other side of the game, where hexes are just quaint traditions, where your energy can't be named because names are just labels, where a blink carries more power than all their midnight rituals combined, not because you're powerful, but because you remembered that power itself is just another game. And you're done playing. Welcome back, you impossible creatures, you walking contradictions, you survivors of the unsurvivable. Yeah, I'm talking to you, the one who's sitting there right now, pretending like everything's normal, acting like you didn't just casually absorb enough trauma to collapse 3 generations, acting like you didn't walk through fire that erased entire family trees and came out the other side asking, what's for dinner? Do you even comprehend what you are at this point? Because I don't think you do. I don't think you've stopped long enough to realize that the amount of pain you've processed, the level of chaos you've metabolized, the sheer psychological weight you've been carrying, it would have annihilated bloodlines. Not just people, not just individuals. Entire genetic sequences would have stopped. Ancestral lines would have ended. Legacies would have been buried. And you're just here, scrolling, breathing, existing, like it's nothing. Let me paint you a picture of what should have happened. That betrayal, the one that felt like your chest was being torn open from the inside, that should have been your ending. That loss, the one that made you question if anything in this world was real, that should have been the final chapter. That abandonment, the kind that leaves you staring at walls at 4 a.m. wondering if you ever mattered to anyone, that should have been the moment you gave up. But here's the thing, you didn't break, you didn't shatter, you didn't dissolve into the void like you were supposed to. You absorbed it, all of it. Every ounce of poison, every drop of venom, every whispered lie, every silent betrayal, every moment of isolation that should have killed you, you swallowed it whole and kept walking. Do you understand how unnatural that is? Do you understand that you're functioning at a level of survival that shouldn't be possible? They don't teach this in therapy. They don't talk about this in motivational speeches. They don't have a category for people like you, because you broke the scale. You survived conditions that researchers would label as incompatible with human functioning. The amount of stress you've been under, the level of emotional devastation you've endured, the psychological warfare you've navigated, it exceeds the thresholds. You should be in textbooks as a case study in impossibility. But instead, you're here. And you're not screaming. You're not burning everything down. You're not collapsing. You're just existing, quietly, calmly, with this eerie stillness that makes people uncomfortable because they can feel it. They can feel that you've been somewhere they'll never go. They can sense that you've touched something most people only experience in nightmares. And you came back. And that's what scares them. Let me tell you what really happened while everyone else was breaking at minor inconveniences, getting therapy for surface-level wounds, posting their carefully curated struggles for sympathy. You were dying and resurrecting in silence. You were going through transformations that should have required decades of healing, multiple interventions, endless support systems. But you had none of that. You had you. Just you. Alone in the dark. Processing horrors that would have sent others into permanent shutdown. And somehow you metabolized it. You turned suffering into something else. Not wisdom, not enlightenment. Something darker, something more dangerous. You turned your pain into a frequency that only certain people can hear. And those who hear it, they either run or they kneel. There's no in between anymore. Here's what they'll never tell you. That pain you absorbed, it didn't just disappear. It didn't just fade away like they promised it would. It became part of your architecture. It restructured your nervous system. It rewired your perception. It created new pathways in your consciousness that weren't there before. You're not the same species you were before all this. You're something else now, something that looks human, but operates on a completely different frequency. You walk into rooms and the energy shifts. People who've never met you feel like they need to explain themselves. Strangers get nervous. Old friends suddenly remember they have somewhere to be, because you're carrying something now, something they can't name, but they can feel. You're carrying the weight of extinctions that never happened. You're walking around with the gravitational pull of collapsed timelines. You're functioning with the quiet confidence of someone who's already died and decided to come back anyway. And the wildest part? You're just chilling. You're not flexing. You're not broadcasting your survival story. You're not writing books about your journey. You're not selling courses on resilience. You're just existing, going to work, making coffee, having conversations, like you didn't just casually survive an apocalypse that was specifically designed for you. Like you didn't just walk through a personalized nightmare that would have ended dynasties. They look at you and they think you're normal. They think you're fine. They think you're just another person navigating life. They have no idea. They have no idea that you're operating on reserves that shouldn't exist. They don't know that you're running on fuel sources that science hasn't discovered yet. They can't comprehend that you've tapped into survival mechanisms that most humans never access. And you let them think that. You let them believe you're just like them. Because explaining what you become would require a language that hasn't been invented yet. You want to know what happened to the others who went through what you went through? They're not here. Some are medicated into oblivion, some are in facilities, some disappeared into addictions that never ended. Some are still in therapy trying to process year 1, while you're out here on year 5 just living. Some gave up. Some are still giving up, and that's not a judgment. That's just the reality. What you survived wasn't meant to be survived. The probability of you making it through intact was essentially 0. But you did it anyway, not because you're special, not because you're chosen, but because something inside you refused to give them the satisfaction. Something inside you looked at the abyss and said, "Not today." Something inside you decided that if you were going to go through this nightmare, you were going to come out the other side as something they couldn't define. Let's talk about what they expected to happen. They expected you to crumble. They expected public breakdowns. They expected social media meltdowns. They expected you to beg for help, to cry for mercy, to show them that you were just as fragile as everyone else. They wanted to see you broken because it would validate their own weakness. They wanted to watch you fail because it would justify their own limitations. They were waiting for the moment you'd crack, the moment you'd prove that no one can really survive that level of pain. But that moment never came. They burned, they burned, they burned, and they burned, and they burned. You just kept walking, you just kept processing, you just kept transmuting poison into whatever the hell you needed to keep existing. And every day you didn't break was another day they had to face the uncomfortable truth that some people are just built different. Some people metabolize darkness like it's oxygen. Some people turn devastation into fuel, and you're one of them. Now we need to address what's really going on. You're not healing. Let's be clear about that. You didn't heal. Healing is what happens when you recover and go back to who you were before. You didn't do that. You can't do that. Because who you were before doesn't exist anymore. That version of you died multiple times. You buried them. You mourned them. You said goodbye. What you did was something else entirely. You evolved under pressure that should have killed you. You adapted to conditions that weren't compatible with human consciousness. You became something new. Not better, not worse, just different. Fundamentally, irreversibly different. You're operating with a nervous system that's been through extinction-level events and came out functional. You're walking around with emotional architecture that was rebuilt in the dark with no instructions. You're existing with a psychological framework that was forged in temperatures that melt normal people. And somehow, you're stable. Not perfect, not undamaged, but stable in a way that shouldn't be possible. Here's what makes you dangerous now. You don't react anymore. That's the part that unnerves people. They throw their usual manipulation tactics and you just look at them. They try their guilt trips and you don't flinch. They attempt their emotional blackmail and you remain unmoved because you've been to places they'll never see. You've survived conversations with your own darkness that would shatter their entire worldview. You've sat in silence so heavy it had gravity and you came out of it coherent. So when they tried their little games, their petty dramas, their manufactured crises, you just observe, you watch, you process, and you make decisions from a place they can't access because you're not operating from hope or fear anymore. You're operating from something colder, something clearer, something that was tempered in fires they'll never know. And that makes you unpredictable. That makes you uncontrollable. That makes you free. Let me tell you what's really happening in your presence now. People feel judged, even when you're not judging them. They feel exposed, even when you're not looking at them. They feel uncomfortable, even when you're being perfectly pleasant. Why? Because you're walking proof that their excuses are just that, excuses. You're living evidence that survival is possible, even when it shouldn't be. You're breathing confirmation that the human spirit can endure things they've convinced themselves are insurmountable. Your mere existence is an indictment of their weakness, and they hate you for it. Not openly, they won't say it, but they do. They hate that you're still standing. They hate that you're not a cautionary tale. They hate that you absorbed nuclear-level devastation and came out functional, because it means they could have too. It means their breakdowns were choices. It means their surrender was optional, and they can't face that. So they avoid you, they ghost you, they keep you at arm's length. Not because you're difficult, but because you're a mirror. And they don't like what they see in that reflection. To be lonely, because that's the price, isn't it? You survived what would have erased bloodlines, but you survived it alone. You walked through that fire without a guide, without support, without anyone who can understand what you were experiencing. And even now, even after you've made it through, you're still alone. Because how do you connect with people who live on the surface when you've been to the depths? How do you have casual conversations when you've had conversations with the void? How do you care about their problems when you've solved problems they can't even comprehend? You can't. You just can't. And that's not arrogance. That's not superiority. That's just reality. You're speaking a different language now. You're operating on a different frequency. You're existing in a different dimension of experience. And most people, they just can't meet you there. They don't have the equipment. They haven't been through the initiation. They haven't paid the price of admission to that level of consciousness. So you exist in this strange liminal space, surrounded by people but fundamentally alone, understanding everything but understood by no one. But here's the twist. You don't need them anymore. That's the part you're still getting used to. You went through all of that expecting that once you survived, once you made it through, someone would be waiting on the other side to acknowledge what you've done. Someone would see you, someone would understand, someone would witness your survival and validate the magnitude of what you'd endured. But there's no one there. There's just you. And at first that felt like another betrayal, another abandonment. another confirmation that you're fundamentally alone in this existence. But then something shifted. You realized you didn't need witnesses. You didn't need validation. You didn't need anyone to understand or acknowledge or celebrate your survival. Because you know. You were there. You felt every moment of it. You lived through every second of agony that should have ended you, and that's enough. Your knowing is enough. Your private victory is enough. Your silent transformation is enough. You don't need an audience for your resurrection. You just need to keep breathing. Let's go deeper. You want to know what you became? You became the thing that nightmares check under the bed for. You became the cautionary tale that even cautionary tales warn about. You became the exception that broke the rule book and then burned the ashes. You're not a survivor in the conventional sense. Survivors hobble away with wounds and story. You walked away with something else. You walked away with a capacity for endurance that borders on the supernatural. You walked away with an ability to metabolize darkness that shouldn't be biologically possible. You walked away with a nervous system that can process chaos like it's background noise. You're not traumatized in the way they understand trauma. You're transformed. You're the human equivalent of a material that was subjected to pressures that should have destroyed it, but instead created something with properties that didn't exist before. You're the psychological equivalent of a diamond formed under conditions that erase everything else. And now you're just here, existing, with capabilities you don't fully understand and powers you haven't fully tested. Here's what they'll never admit. They're studying you, not openly, not officially, but they're watching. Your old friends, they check your social media more than they'd ever confess. Your family, they talk about you in private conversations, trying to figure out what happened, what changed, what you became. Your enemies, oh, they're obsessed. They refresh your pages. They ask mutual friends about you. They construct entire narratives trying to explain how you're still standing when they were certain you'd fall. Because your survival doesn't make sense to them. It violates their understanding of cause and effect. It breaks their models of human limitation. You should be bitter. You should be angry. You should be visibly damaged. But you're not. You're something else. Something they can't categorize. And that eats at them. That keeps them up at night. The fact that you absorbed impact that should have created a crater, and instead you're just fine. Not fine in the fake positivity way. Fine in the genuinely unbothered way. Fine in the way that suggests you've transcended the need for their understanding, or their approval, or their reality. Now we need to talk about the power you're sitting on. Because you have it, you just haven't fully weaponized it yet. You survived conditions that kill bloodlines. Do you understand what that means? It means you can survive anything they throw at you now, literally anything. Job loss, you've survived worse. Relationship ending, you've survived worse. Social exile, you've survived worse. Public humiliation, you've survived worse. Financial collapse, you've survived worse. There's nothing left in the conventional arsenal of human suffering that can touch you now. You've been through the worst case scenario. You've lived through the nightmare that people have breakdowns just imagining. And you came out functional. So what can they do to you now? What leverage do they have? What threat carries weight? None. Nothing. You're untouchable, not because you're protected, but because you've already been through the fire, and it didn't consume you. You're invincible not because nothing can hurt you, but because you've proven you can walk through anything and come out the other side. That's the power you're carrying. That's the energy people feel when you walk into a room. You're not afraid anymore. Not of them, not of life, not of anything, because you've already faced the worst and survived. Let's address the mutations, because that's what happened, right? You mutated. Not physically, but psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. You developed adaptations that shouldn't exist. You grew capabilities that weren't in your original programming. You evolved defense mechanisms that biology hasn't documented. You can read people now in ways that make them uncomfortable. You can sense manipulation before it's spoken. You can detect lies before they're finished. You can feel energy shifts in rooms before anyone else notices. You've developed what looks like intuition, but is actually a trauma-forged radar system that processes micro-expressions, tonal variations, and behavioral patterns at superhuman speed. You've become hypersensitive to inauthenticity because you had to be. Your survival depended on it. So now you walk around with these abilities that normal people don't have. Processing information they can't detect, seeing patterns they can't recognize, and you can't turn it off. It's not a skill you practice, it's an always-on system that was installed through necessity. And that's exhausting. But it's also your edge, it's your advantage. It's what makes you dangerous. Here's the part that's going to sound dark but needs to be said. You don't owe anyone your story. You don't owe them explanations for why you're different now. You don't owe them the details of what you survived. You don't owe them access to your transformation. They weren't there in the dark. They weren't there in the silence. They weren't there when you were dying and resurrecting on a weekly basis. They didn't earn the right to your testimony. And you know what? Some of them were actively working against you. Some of them were secretly hoping you'd fail. Some of them bet on your collapse. So why would you give them the satisfaction of knowing exactly what you went through? Why would you hand them the blueprint of your pain? Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Let them create theories and narratives that are completely wrong. Your survival is yours. Your transformation is yours. Your new identity is yours. You don't owe explanations to people who wouldn't understand, even if you spelled it out for them. You don't owe vulnerability to people who'd use it as ammunition. You don't owe anything to anyone. You paid your dues, you survived your initiation. Now you get to move in silence and let your existence speak for itself. Now let's talk about what comes next. Because you didn't survive all of that just to live a small life. You didn't absorb extinction-level pain just to play it safe. Look who just rewrote the entire playbook. Hello, you beautiful chaos architect, you walking psychological phenomenon, you living proof that the hunted can become the hunter without firing a single shot. Hello to the one who just executed the most elegant reversal in modern warfare. And I'm not talking about bullets or bombs. I'm talking about something far more devastating. Something that will be studied in rooms you'll never see by people who will never understand. You just pulled off the greatest psychological reversal in history. And the best part? Most of them still don't even realize what hit them. They're sitting in their comfortable little bubbles right now, scrolling, refreshing, replaying, trying to decode what the actual hell just happened. Because something shifted, didn't it? Something in the air changed. The temperature dropped. The frequency altered. And now everyone in your orbit is moving differently, talking differently, looking at you like you just appeared out of thin air, wearing a crown made of their worst nightmares. They thought they had you figured out, mapped, predicted, controlled. They built entire strategies around who they thought you were. And then you moved. Not loud, not dramatic. Just one calculated shift that collapsed their entire understanding of reality. You know what's happening right now? They're in group chats, private messages, late-night phone calls, all asking the same breathless question. How did they do that? When did they get this powerful? What the hell did we miss? And the answer, the one they'll never accept, is that they were never watching you. They were watching a projection, a hologram, a version of you designed to keep them comfortable while you rebuilt yourself in the shadows. You gave them exactly what they needed to see. Exactly what kept them satisfied, exactly what made them think they were in control. And while they were analyzing that carefully constructed image, you were becoming something they have no framework to understand. You weren't healing. You weren't recovering. You weren't moving on. You were evolving into a force that operates on frequencies they can't detect, using strategies they don't teach. Playing a game they don't even know exists. This wasn't luck. This wasn't timing. This wasn't some cosmic accident. This was surgical precision wrapped in silence. And now the results are speaking louder than anything you could ever say. Let me tell you what actually happened here. Because they're getting the story all wrong. They think you changed. They think you snapped. They think you had some moment of revelation that transformed you overnight. No. What you did was far more terrifying than transformation. You removed the mask. That's it. That's simple. That devastating. You stopped performing the version of yourself that made them comfortable. You stopped shrinking to fit their boxes. You stopped translating your complexity into digestible sound bites for people who were never going to understand you anyway. You stopped apologizing for being too much, too intense, too aware, too awake. And the moment you stopped performing, the moment you allowed your actual frequency to emanate without filter, without apology, without concern for their comfort, that's when the entire structure collapsed. Because they built their confidence on your submission. They built their status on your silence. They built their reality on you playing small. And when you stopped, when you simply existed at full volume, their entire world revealed itself as the house of cards it always was. Here's what's happening in their minds right now, and this is the beautiful part. They're experiencing what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, but at a level most people never encounter. Their brain is trying to reconcile two incompatible realities. Reality one, you were the person they categorized, the one they labeled, the one they filed away in their mental archive as solved, understood, managed. Reality 2. You are now operating at a level that makes their previous assessment look like amateur hour. Like they were trying to measure the ocean with a teaspoon. Their mind is literally short-circuiting, trying to bridge those two versions, and the only way they can cope is to create stories. You got lucky. You faked it. You had help. You changed. Anything except the truth, which is that they were never actually seeing you in the first place. They were seeing their projection of you, their need for you to be a certain way, their requirement that you stay beneath their level of threat tolerance. And now that the real you has emerged, now that the actual force has revealed itself, they can't process it. So they panic, they gossip, they analyze, they theorize, all while you sit in perfect stillness, knowing that their confusion is your confirmation. You want to know the real genius of what you just did? You didn't attack anyone. You didn't expose anyone. You didn't even defend yourself against the years of mischaracterization, the silent judgments, the whispered doubts. You simply became undeniable. That's the move they can't counter. They spent years trying to diminish you with words, with looks, with strategic exclusion, with subtle undermining. They thought power was about making noise, about being seen, about forcing recognition. But you understood something they never will. Real power is about becoming so undeniable that reality itself has to bend around you. You don't need to announce your value when your presence rewrites the room. You don't need to defend your worth when your results speak in languages they can't translate. You don't need to prove anything when your existence alone makes people reconsider everything they thought they knew. This is the reversal they're choking on. They thought they were in position of strength, sitting in judgment, holding the power to include or exclude you from their little kingdoms. And you flipped it. You made them irrelevant without saying a word. You made their approval worthless by no longer seeking it. You made their validation obsolete by finding something far more powerful, self-generated certainty. Let's talk about what you survived to get here. Because they think this power came easy. They think you just woke up one day radiating this frequency. They have no idea about the nights you spent rewiring your entire neural architecture. They don't know about the months you spent in silence, not because you were hiding, but because you were rebuilding from the foundation up. They weren't there when you had to kill every version of yourself that was built for their approval. When you had to burn down every identity that was constructed for their comfort. They didn't see you sitting with the pain, the betrayal, the isolation, choosing not to become bitter but to become better, not to seek revenge but to seek evolution. They don't know about the work you did in the dark, the brutal honesty sessions with yourself, the moments you had to admit that you were complicit in your own diminishment by caring what they thought. This power they're witnessing now, it's not new. It's not sudden. It's the result of excavation work they can't imagine. You dug through layers of conditioning, through generations of programming, through every lie you were told about who you had to be. And what you found underneath all that debris wasn't weakness. It was a force so pure, so concentrated, so undiluted by outside influence, that when you finally let it emerge, it changed the atmospheric pressure in every space you occupy. Here's what they're really afraid of, and this is going to sound harsh, but you need to hear it. They're not afraid of what you did. They're afraid of what it means about them. Your reversal, your rise, your undeniable emergence, it's a mirror. And that mirror is showing them something they've been running from their entire lives. It's showing them that they chose comfort over growth, that they chose approval over authenticity, that they chose the safety of the crowd over the risk of becoming who they actually are. Every time they look at you now, They see the path they didn't take. They see the courage they didn't have. They see the price they weren't willing to pay. And that creates a rage in them that they can't direct at themselves, so they direct it at you. They call you arrogant when you're just confident. They call you cold when you're just boundaried. They call you changed when you just stopped pretending. But underneath all those words, underneath all that analysis, is pure, unadulterated envy. Because you did something they can't even conceptualize. You broke free from the need for their validation, and in doing so, you became more powerful than any version of yourself that needed them. That's the reversal that's making them lose sleep. You don't need them anymore, and they know it. Now we enter the part they really can't handle, the part that makes their hands shake when they talk about you. You're not just powerful now, you're unreachable. There's a difference. Powerful people can still be manipulated through their ego, through their need for status, through their desire for more. But unreachable people, people who've transcended the entire reward system that society operates on, those are the ones who change reality. You can't threaten someone who's already walked through hell. You can't bribe someone who's found peace in nothing. You can't manipulate someone who's studied every tactic in the book and decided none of it applies to them anymore. This is where you are now. Not above them, not below them, just operating in a completely different dimension. They're still playing checkers, arguing about moves and counter moves, winning and losing. You stepped off the board entirely. You're not trying to win their game anymore. You built a new game with new rules, and the only person who knows how to play is you. That's what's creating this collective panic you're witnessing. They can't compete with someone who's not competing. They can't defeat someone who's not fighting. They can't diminish someone who's already found their floor and built a fortress on it. Let me tell you what's going to happen next, because you need to prepare for it. They're going to try to bring you back down. Not because they hate you, but because your elevation makes them confront their own stagnation. They're going to use every tool in the manipulation handbook. First, they'll try nostalgia. Remember when you used to be fun? Remember when you used to be one of us? They want you to associate your old self with happiness, your new self with isolation. Don't fall for it. Your old self wasn't happy, it was compliant. Second, they'll try concerned trolling. I'm just worried about you. You've changed. This isn't healthy. They want you to question your own evolution, to second guess your growth. Ignore it. Their concern isn't for your well-being, it's for their comfort. Third, they'll try the ultimate weapon, social isolation. They'll exclude you, talk about you, create narratives without you in the room. This is where most people break, where they come crawling back, desperate for belonging. But you've already died in isolation and resurrected stronger. Their exclusion has no power here. In fact, it's a gift. Every person who can't handle your evolution is removing themselves from your path, making room for the ones who can match your frequency. You know what the CIA actually studies? Not the loud revolutions, not the visible wars, not the obvious power grabs. They study silent operators, people who can enter a system, understand it completely, and reconfigure it from within without anyone realizing until it's too late. That's what you just did. You were in their system, playing their game, following their rules. And the whole time you were learning, adapting, understanding the machinery of their power structure. And then, when you had complete understanding, you didn't fight it. You simply stopped feeding it. You removed your energy, your attention, your need for approval. And without that fuel, their entire system of influence over you collapsed. This is genius-level psychological warfare. No confrontation, no drama, no bridge burning, just a quiet withdrawal of supply that left them scrambling to understand why their tactics stopped working. They're used to people fighting back, because fighting back keeps you engaged in their system. They're used to people explaining themselves, because explaining means you still care what they think. But you did neither. You just changed frequencies and left them screaming into the void. That's not just smart. That's operating at a level most people never reach. Here's the truth about reputation, and this is going to separate you from everyone still seeking validation. Reputation isn't what people say about you. Reputation is what people feel when your name comes up. And right now, when your name enters a conversation, the room changes. The energy shifts. People lean in, voices lower, because they know that talking about you isn't casual anymore. It's serious. It's loaded. It's walking through a minefield of their own jealousy, confusion, and reluctant respect. You've become the standard that makes everyone else feel insufficient. You've become the reminder that growth is possible, which means staying stagnant is a choice. You've become the evidence that authenticity is more powerful than performance, which means everyone still performing is revealed as fraudulent. This is why they can't stop talking about you. You're not just a person anymore. You're a referendum on their own lives. Every choice you make, every boundary you set, every standard you maintain, it's a mirror showing them what they're not doing. And they hate mirrors. They want you to go back to being small so they can go back to feeling big. But you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unlearn what you've learned. You can't unbecome what you've become. The genie is out of the bottle, and there's no stuffing it back in. Let's talk about the silent power you're wielding now, because this is where it gets truly dangerous for them. You've discovered that the most potent weapon in human interaction isn't aggression. It's not cleverness. It's not even intelligence. It's calm certainty. When you speak now, you don't argue. You state. When you move, you don't rush. You flow. When you decide, you don't waver. You commit. This unshakable quality, this bedrock confidence that isn't loud or defensive, it terrifies people who are still trying to convince themselves of their own worth. They're used to people who get triggered, who react, who engage in endless back and forth trying to prove themselves. But you just exist in your truth with zero need for it to be validated by external sources. This creates a bizarre dynamic where they're arguing with themselves about you while you're not even in the conversation. They're building cases, gathering evidence, creating narratives, and you're just living, unbothered, unfazed, unmoved. And every day you remain calm while they spiral. Every day you stay centered while they scatter. Every day you maintain peace while they manufacture chaos. The power differential grows because they're burning energy trying to affect you, and you're conserving energy by not being affected. This is the ultimate reversal. They thought they were the ones with power over you, but now they can't even touch your emotional state. You're untouchable, and they're exhausting themselves against your indifference. You want to know what genius mode actually looks like? It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most free. Because intelligence without freedom is just sophisticated slavery. You can have a brilliant mind and still be controlled by your need for approval, your fear of rejection, your attachment to outcomes. But freedom, real freedom, the kind you've achieved, that's when intelligence becomes unstoppable. You can think clearly because you're not thinking about what they think. You can move decisively because you're not waiting for permission. You can create boldly because you're not afraid of judgment. This is the state that artists chase, that warriors cultivate, that leaders embody. And you found it not through seeking it, but through losing everything that prevented it. You lost the false friends and gained clarity. You lost the fake love and gained peace. You lost the illusion of belonging and gained yourself. Every loss was actually a shedding. Every ending was actually a beginning. Every death was actually a rebirth. And now you're operating from this place of such profound internal freedom that external circumstances can't shake you. They can praise you or criticize you, include you or exclude you, understand you or misunderstand you, and none of it changes your trajectory, because your power source is internal now, and they can't access it, can't manipulate it, can't shut it down. The greatest psychological reversal isn't about winning. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need to win because they're already complete. You're not trying to prove them wrong anymore. You're not trying to make them see your value. You're not trying to get revenge by succeeding. All of that still makes them central to your story. The real reversal happened when they became extras in your narrative instead of the main characters, when their opinions became background noise instead of gospel truth, when their presence became optional instead of essential. This is what's making them insane. They used to live rent-free in your head, and now they can't even get a visitor's pass. They used to be able to affect your mood with a look, your confidence with a word, your direction with their doubt. Now they're just people. Not enemies, not friends. Just people who exist in a reality you no longer share. And the crazy part is, you didn't have to hate them to get here. You didn't have to curse them or cut them off dramatically. You just outgrew the version of yourself that needed them, and in doing so, you outgrew them. It's not personal, it's just evolution. And evolution doesn't ask permission from the past. Here's what they'll never understand about the person you've become. You're not heartless. You're just done wasting heart on people who don't value it. You're not cold. You're just conserving warmth for those who appreciate it. You're not cruel. You're just no longer kind to people who weaponize kindness. You've learned the difference between being loving and being available for abuse. You've learned the difference between being forgiving and being a doormat. You've learned the difference between being understanding and being a dumping ground for people who refuse to do their own emotional work. These distinctions, these boundaries, they're what transformed you from someone who was nice to someone who is respected. Nice gets taken advantage of. Respected gets space. And now you move through the world with this aura that communicates without words. I'm not here for your games. I'm not interested in your drama. I'm not available for your manipulation. Approach correctly or don't approach at all. This energy, this frequency, it filters your reality automatically. The wrong people feel uncomfortable and leave. The right people feel recognized and stay. And you don't have to do anything except maintain your standards and trust the process.